Imagine standing in a dimly lit medieval church, surrounded by rigid figures painted in flat gold backgrounds. The stories they tell seem distant, and the people appear almost lifeless. But then, a shift happens. Artists begin to breathe life into these scenes. Faces become expressive, bodies feel grounded, and the world behind them opens up. This wasn't just an evolution in technique, it was a revolution in how we experience art. This was the dawn of the early Renaissance, a time when a handful of trailblazing artists transformed the way we see, feel, and understand storytelling in art. Let's meet the early masters who led this charge: Giotto, Masaccio, and Fra Angelico. These artists broke away from the Gothic style and laid the foundations of the Renaissance by introducing naturalism, emotion, and perspective. They didn't just paint pictures, they told human stories, and in doing so, they changed art forever. Our journey begins with Giotto da Bondone. Born in 1267, Giotto is often hailed as the father of the Renaissance. In a time when art was dominated by the stiff, stylized figures of the Byzantine tradition, Giotto did something remarkable. He looked at the real world. He painted figures that had weight, emotions, and a sense of space. His frescoes in the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua, painted around 1305, are a stunning example. In the scene The Lamentation, we see raw grief as mourners weep over the dead Christ. Their faces twist with sorrow, their bodies lean in with heavy sadness. This wasn't just religious art, it was human experience captured on plaster. But Giotto didn't stop there. He introduced depth by arranging figures in the foreground and background, creating a sense of three-dimensional space. This shift from flat, symbolic representations to lifelike scenes was groundbreaking. Giotto paved the way for the Renaissance by reminding artists that art could reflect life itself. Fast forward a century to Masaccio, another visionary who took Giotto's ideas and pushed them even further. Born in 1401, Masaccio is known for his mastery of perspective and realism. His fresco, The Holy Trinity, painted in 1427, is a textbook example of early Renaissance art. In it, Masaccio creates a deep, barrel-vaulted chapel that appears to recede into the wall. The figures are solid, lifelike, and positioned in a realistic space. This was linear perspective in action, a technique that was just beginning to revolutionize art. Masaccio didn't just focus on spatial realism, he brought a sense of naturalism to his figures. In his fresco The Expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden, painted for the Brancacci Chapel, Adam and Eve's faces are contorted with shame and despair. Adam covers his eyes in anguish, while Eve cries out in grief. Their bodies are depicted with anatomical accuracy, capturing the weight of their emotional burden. Through Masaccio's work, art took a giant leap toward realism and emotional depth. Then we have Fra Angelico, a Dominican friar whose work blended the new Renaissance techniques with a sense of spiritual grace. Born around 1395, Fra Angelico is best known for his serene and luminous frescoes in the convent of San Marco in Florence. His painting, The Annunciation, captures a moment of divine stillness. The figures of the angel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary are bathed in soft light, standing in a space defined by graceful arches and careful perspective. Fra Angelico's use of perspective enhanced the sacred atmosphere of his works, making the divine feel almost tangible. What set these early masters apart was their desire to tell stories that felt real and relatable. They painted scenes that drew viewers in, creating connections between the sacred and the human, the heavenly and the earthly. This was a massive departure from the Gothic style, where figures often seemed otherworldly and detached. The Renaissance embraced the idea that human experience, with all its emotions, struggles, and beauty, was worth depicting with honesty and care. These innovations in naturalism, emotion, and storytelling didn't happen in isolation. They reflected a broader cultural shift toward humanism, a belief in the value and dignity of human life. Artists began to study anatomy, explore the natural world, and think about how to depict reality accurately. They weren't just painting, they were investigating the world around them. Of course, change didn't happen overnight. The Gothic style lingered, and some artists resisted this new wave of naturalism. But as the Renaissance spread, the works of Giotto, Masaccio, and Fra Angelico inspired a generation of artists who would push these ideas even further. Painters like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael stood on the shoulders of these early masters, taking their experiments with realism, perspective, and emotion to dazzling new heights. The early Renaissance was more than just a shift in artistic style. It was a transformation in how people viewed the world and each other. Thanks to Giotto's realism, Masaccio's perspective, and Fra Angelico's grace, art became a mirror of human experience. These trailblazers didn't just change paintings, they changed how stories were told, how emotions were shared, and how reality was represented. Today, every time we marvel at a lifelike portrait or an immersive painting, we're witnessing the legacy of these pioneers. They remind us that art is about more than just technique, it's about connection. So the next time you look at a painting that moves you, remember the early masters who dared to make art feel alive. They didn't just paint figures, they painted us, our joy, our sorrow, our humanity. And they set the stage for a whole new era of artistic brilliance.